Welcome to Area DMG.
Welcome back to Area DMG. I'm your host, Philip Wesley, the Mile High Mouth, and today we're going to take a look at Disney's Wreck-It Ralph, mainly because the new movie hits today on Thanksgiving, and why not take a look at the first 15 minutes of it? So, Disney's Shrek-It Ralph is a movie based on a fictional video game based slightly on Donkey Kong, but with a healthy dose of nostalgia and in jokes for the nerds among us. Y'all know who you are. Anyhow, this is a look at how well the first 15 minutes of Wreck-It Ralph do in terms of setting up the story, the world, and the conflicts of the movie. A few notes: there may be minor spoilers in here, these are an examination of the most important aspects of film design, the draw phase, if you will. There will be time to take a look at other concepts of film critique later on, but for now, we're looking at the initial scenes of this film and why it does or does not work. Then we're going to give a small letter grade. But instead of Fortnite stuff in the background this time, there are more appropriate retro games in the background. So, yeah, you're welcome. I know people are like, why don't you use images or scenes from the films we talk about here? Because we're a video game channel, and honestly, most of these companies are trigger happy about strikes. So, yeah. Anyways, I'm watching this on the delicious 4K UHD Blu-ray release for this, and it is gorgeous. I mean, seriously good looking. Every scan line is beautiful, and so many details just pop. The next Disney Canon 4K release is The Lion King, so yeah, we'll be doing that one at some point. But I can't wait for some of these 4K releases. I think Bolt is gonna look good, Frozen, Tangled, things like The Little Mermaid, Atlantis. Oh man, 4K version of Atlantis, like just that'd be so good. Treasure Planet's another one where I think people once they see it, people really need to sit down and look at Brother Bear or Atlantis and Treasure Planet and realize that these are great films. They aren't that well known. I mean, I would say that Pocahontas was the beginning of the end for most of that Disney Renaissance, and it's really a shame. You had some smaller movies like I don't think I saw Lilo and Stitch in theaters. That was during the what I'd refer to as the kind of the dark ages for Disney. It's a great movie, but like Bolt, it's one of those that people just overlook because, well, it wasn't in the heyday. For Wreck-It Ralph, if I remember correctly, was following after I think we had what, Tangled? Yeah. And this was before Frozen, like before Frozen became huge and all sorts of other stuff. So yeah, let's get into this. I mean, I can't wait to see 4K releases for a bunch of these. I mean, thinking about how stuff like depends on whether or not they decided to use film grain in these. I mean, there were some things. Some people were upset because they were cleaning up film grain in Pinocchio and in a couple of the older ones. But come on, a wonderful crisp Fantasia 2000 in 4K, those would be amazing. And Aladdin, The Little Mermaid, maybe with Aladdin they could do the right thing and give us the actual background music, the actual score. I'd love to get an uncensored Aladdin. I'd love to get an uncensored Fun and Fancy Free or Melody Time or Fantasia for that matter. Come on, Disney, just let it out there uncensored and just let it fall where it may. There are people who are going to complain on the internet, but don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. They'll get over them. They never actually do get over themselves, but these are people who will very likely, well, all that imaginary stress has got to wear down on them somehow. Anyways, before we begin, I've played the arcade game developed to promote this, and I hope to play more of it again sometime. I mean, it should have a console release. Seriously, come on, Disney, just do it. I mean, if we're getting some kind of weird Fortnite thing with Wreck-It Ralph for the Ralph Breaks the Internet release, so why not just release the original? Like, just release it as an arcade classic on everything. It would be awesome. Anyways, so let's get down into this. I mean, just do that, Disney. Just do it. Anyhow, let's start with the first shot of the movie, which is one of the most important parts of your movie. What is your first shot of your movie? And for this one, the first shot of the movie is the outside of the arcade game. To the left is Pac Man, to the right, Space Invaders, which is best on Super Game Boy, by the way. Then Frogger to the far right, and Dragon's Lair to the far left, which means that this game, or rather that year, is technically 1983 at the beginning shot because of Dragon's Lair. It's actually much further along. Anyways, the movie starts with what I'm going to refer to as the laziest of narrative devices. Ralph introducing himself, his game, Felix, the Nicelanders, and his basic world through voiceover. Voiceover is the glitter of cinema. Glitter is the herpes of the art world. That said, it can be used effectively if it's not done in a boring way. You see, this one isn't really done in a boring way. There's a part there he's talking, about his game, then it pulls back away from the game, and you see the progression of time through the arcade. And you see asteroids, turbo time, which is important, other video games, and if you're just like pausing it at multiple times to look at the games there, it's got some good stuff. They had the Sonic arcade game in there at one point. They had Asteroids, Space Invaders, of course, House of the Dead. You have some interesting other games too. Yeah, just go back through and watch it. I mean, seriously, it's just pure nostalgia. And if you're a gamer worth anything, you've played some of these arcade games. If you've never been in an arcade, I I feel bad for you. Like seriously, go to an arcade or a barcade or a bowling alley or a Chuck E. Cheese or something. Go to conventions like Rocky Mountain Pinball Showdown or event places. Just do yourself a favor. I mean, go to even a nickel and play or a Chuck E. Cheese will do. Just play some arcade games. Come on, put the quarter in the machine or the token or whatnot and play it. Also, just watch the movement of the machines in this. They eventually move to match that initial shot, which is actually a nice little story that's shown and not told. Oh, by the way, you can also see that Sugar Rush has Vanellope on both sides of the cabinet, so they set her and Turbo up with quote cameos end quote right from the beginning. She's by the Whack-A-Troll, not a whack-a-mole. Whack-A-Troll. Nah, I guess it's kind of funny. Hero's Duty is also put up in that montage, and it looks like it replaces House of the Dead, which was probably moved as the zombie in Badanon is kind of technically from that, although they might be from like Undead Apocalypse or something like that. 3. Anyways, we're given all of Ralph's basic story beats and motivations nice and early in the first 5 minutes, and then we hear the first instance of the word turbo, which is an interesting concept that they don't go into too much. One thing to note though about Ralph's basic storyline, okay, so the Nicelanders pushed him out of stump, his area where his stump was, and now he's mad at them, wants to wreck their home. He's kind of Disney's answer to Shrek, to the point where at one point they have him completely green and covered in stuff, like mud-ish stuff, and also he's cracking potty jokes and stuff with Vanellope. He's essentially their take on Shrek. It's Shrek at Ralph. Yeah. Mm. Anyways, we're introduced to the concept of characters getting unplugged and moving from game to game, and that the Nicelanders aren't exactly the nicest to Ralph. We also get the bad guy affirmation, which is kind of the point of the movie, which moral wise, it's kind of a gray area. The idea is that everyone has a distinct purpose and point in life, and we shouldn't go against that, but we can stretch it and accept ourselves in our roles. The idea of one game at a time is interesting. There's a lot of interesting psychology examples in this film, and we'll get into those at some point in cultural psychopathy. Anyways, Badanon, though, is based a bit on Alcoholics Anonymous, or maybe if I want to look at it even more sinisterly, it seems to be based more on Narconon. Considering that it's not a list or steps and that the bad guy affirmation is more of a chant, it's closer to Narconon, which that's Scientology. And I don't exactly have good or sweet thoughts about Scientology. It's not a sugar rush for me. Much of an Alcoholics Anonymous is based on biblical roots and morals, and I like their steps and affirmations a lot more. Anyhow, we're shown the world and then the whole setup for Ralph to game jump for a medal is set up within the first 15 minutes. we're giving kind of a hint as how he will at exactly around the 15-minute mark when he runs into the Hero's Duty soldier. Now, Hero's Duty, Sugar Rush, and Turbo Time have all been set up already visually, although not completely introduced. We also have at one point Sonic the Hedgehog introducing the idea of permadeath in the universe, as well as the idea of unplugged games being, quote, homeless, end quote. Now, we're also given a lot of stuff between the Nicelanders being really antagonistic to Ralph, which isn't really his fault. I mean, they're the ones who were technically interloping on his land that he was originally inhabited, so they're not exactly the good guys, technically speaking. Yeah, he's just, he's like, this is my land. You guys moved my home and did all this stuff to me. Of course, I'm gonna be mad, and I feel that that Wreck-It Ralph is kind of justified in that, you know? Yeah. Anyways, the movie does a good, or rather an okay job of setting up the world and some of the character motivations. Also, Gene in here is kind of an angry alcoholic jerk, and I don't think Ralph is in the wrong for wanting some sort of respect for what he does. I mean, well, the Nicelanders eventually do learn to appreciate him. Gene doesn't really change, which shows that some people are just bad people who don't change regardless, which is neither applauded or really scorned. It's kind of interesting because it's just there. It's just a part of life, and you just kind of accept it. Oh, by the way, I don't count the logos as part of the 15 minutes, so we're introduced to the Hero's Duty character around the 15-minute mark. Within a few seconds past it, we're given the mention of the medal, so Ralph's story is set up. Vanellope's story isn't really introduced until later on in the film, although we've already seen her. Generally, I feel like the setup in the first 15 minutes create a compelling character with Ralph as a whole, but it isn't very good at setting up the other ancillary parts of the story. And while there are a lot of good callbacks to that first 15, but generally, I think I would give the first 15 minutes of Wreck-It Ralph a C. It's good for setting up a little bit of the world and the background and gives you a compelling reason to root for Ralph, but then it just throws it away later in the film for Vanellope's storyline. And while she is an important character for it, and she's more fleshed out apparently in the new movie, which I haven't gotten to see yet. Um, Ralph is essentially she's her storyline's just kind of a copy of Ralph's, and then the whole thing with the cybugs, which they over-explain too, by the way. Um, it's just it kind of falls apart at that point. I mean, you have a pretty strong setup here. You didn't really need Vanellope in here. You didn't really need the whole turbo time thing. You didn't need the cybugs. That a lot of that just felt like padding. And I can understand that. I mean, it's not going to become like a Toy Story or Where the Toys Come From, but it's not in any way like a reboot or a Pixels or a the Emoji Movie. So Wreck-It Ralph is I would say Wreck-It Ralph as a whole is a little bit unfocused, but it's a series of moments. You just kind of accept it as it happens. And if you're a fan of video games, you're going to watch through it all the way through, looking for all the little Easter eggs, making the movie kind of a game in itself. But honestly, Wreck-It Ralph is a nice looking sandwich, but it's mostly cheese and mayonnaise and very little turkey or ham in there. And you're like, but this is kind of why I bought this sandwich, you know? Looks really good though, and Ralph is a great character, and there are some really good character moments, but as far as Disney stuff goes, this is actually a fairly light one. If I were giving this movie its own score, I'll do that at some other point. But while I really like Wreck-It Ralph, and I think it looks fantastic in this, it's not exactly the strongest of these. I would say movies like Bolt are still stronger. Tangled is still a stronger film. It's not as loose and as Zootopia becomes, but overall it's an okay film, especially if it were a DreamWorks film, which it kind of feels a little bit like. I do appreciate all the cameos, and there's some obvious respect to the source material, essentially, and that's good. I mean, actually, I guess the best way to look at this movie is it's kind of bad, but that's not bad. That's good, which is good. I feel like it's fun. Definitely some wonderful music, some wonderful acting in here. Um, while it's like Sarah Silverman is always a creep, she's actually very you can kind of feel for her character in this. And the character of, say, King Candy later on there is truly a despicable character. This is still Disney exploring part of their narcissist era. And you see that in King Candy, and you kind of see that a little bit in Vanellope. And you kind of see some of these characters here just being kind of, this is kind of like saying, hey, some of this, sometimes here, we're here to do something. We're here with a purpose. All of us have a purpose. And if we're not living up to that purpose, maybe there's something wrong there. Or if that purpose becomes self-serving, that's also wrong. So it's an interesting mixed bag. I mean, I'd love to delve into many of the little themes in a later video. We'll talk about philosophy and such, but for now, that's my thought on the first 15 minutes of Wreck-It Ralph. If you haven't seen it yet, go watch it before you go see the new one. Check it out. Looks fantastic in 4K. And yeah, hit that thumbs up, hit that subscribe button, hit that share button, and ring that little bell so that you're notified whenever we have a brand new video out here on Area DMG. And until next video comes out, you are now caught up.
Morning, Maya.